Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Drew. What it do? Hopefully you are having a fantastic day today. So today's video is actually a video podcast in tandem with the Beyond the Garment podcast, a podcast that I host weekly, and I wanted to add a video version of the podcast, just give them a little bit more oomph for the podcast, right? So this week's episode is about fashion, art, and NFTs. I do the podcast kind of like a discussion video I do on YouTube. They're about 10 to 30 minutes long with their monologues. Sometimes I invite guests, but this is the first video monologue podcast. So if you want to learn about fashion, art, and NFTs, here it comes. Enjoy the video. I'll see you guys next week. Yo, what is going on, everyone? Hopefully you guys are having or have had a fantastic week this week. For the Beyond the Garment podcast, there are a couple exciting things in the works right now. So obviously, if you're listening on the audio-based version of the podcast. But what I've done is I'm actually recording this entire podcast with a video version as well. And so what I'm going to be doing for the remainder of, the foreseeable future of the podcast is I'm going to be having the video episodes hosted on my personal YouTube channel, which is just Drew Joyner. And by the time that this episode is out, it won't be available. It'll take me a few days to edit that part of it because I want to add visual elements to it as well. But you'll be able to actually watch the video podcast if you want to. And if you want to continue listening. I appreciate everyone who has listened, who does listen. Thank you guys so much for that. But they're just letting you know there will be a video version. And another thing I'm kind of playing with for the podcast is just understanding when the best time is to post the episodes. With my work schedule, I recently had them being posted on Wednesday, and that worked for, the first season and the first kind of half of this season. And I've had a hard time making sure I can get the workflow done and actually post it on Wednesday. So we're kind of playing with moving it to either Wednesday or Friday. Maybe I'll post the podcast on Wednesday, the audio version on Wednesday, and then the video version on Friday, or maybe on the same day. I don't know. Give me, your comments, leave me a DM or whatever would be the best version for you. What would you like to see? Would you rather see it early in the week or on Friday or something like that? I'm trying to play around and see what's best. Now, if you are watching this and it's the first time you're watching it, literally, this is the video podcast. If you're someone who subscribes to the channel and has been here for a while, I appreciate you for tuning in. This is going to be a fun topic. And if you're new here, this is a Drew What to Do production. This is kind of the setup that I've created for myself moving into 2022. We'll see how it works. We'll see how everything goes for me. I'm very excited. And today's topic is going to be art, fashion, and NFTs, or fashion, art, and NFTs. And one last thing, if you are listening on the Apple version of the podcast or Apple podcast version, feel free to give us a 5-star review. I know this audio is sounding mad crispy to you right now. So, fashion, art, and NFTs. So ever since about 2020, last year, almost 2 years ago now, the word NFT has been a word that I've just been hearing over and over and over and over again, right? I feel like it's just a very buzzword topic in the modern era, in the new decade. And I kind of want to talk about what is an NFT first, because you have to define what something is in order to kind of, for all of us to be on the same level playing field, so then we can kind of just talk more in depth about it. So what do you think an NFT is? It's a rhetorical question. Like, NFT, what do you think that means? Some of you may know. But NFT actually stands for non-fungible token. And the best way I can describe what it looks like in the real world is kind of this video game analogy, right? So non-fungible tokens, that's kind of a weird combination of words. Fungible just means like non-tangible. Think of it as like a non-tangible token, a non-tangible item, right? So like I said, there's a video game analogy that I've heard before that I feel like it really explains it. So if you play video games, or if you know about video games, sometimes in video games what you can do is you can customize your character, right? Whether it be in something like Mario, instead of having a red hat for Mario, he has a blue hat or something like that. That's the idea of kind of what NFT is, where you can purchase with real money items in a digital or virtual world that just gives your character or gives your virtual avatar more personalization than it would be if you hadn't purchased that digital asset. One of the more popular examples of this is in Fortnite, where a lot of people who play Fortnite, it's kind of a free to play multiplayer game. What they'll do is, and what Fortnite has done is they've built out this really robust character customization system, right? And what you can do with your characters, you can essentially customize them to have all the little, personalized denotations that you would want for your character, but you don't get to access any of this customization outside of the virtual world in which Fortnite rests, or where Fortnite is. And it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable the amount of money people are willing to spend. Some people are willing to pay 5, 10, 100, thousands of dollars to customize characters in different games because they want to have that level of intimacy with their digital character, right? Now, this is essentially what an NFT is. It's the ability to purchase things with money, with tangible, real tangible tokens with real money to essentially have a digital asset. And what you can do with that digital asset is you can show it off to other people. You can make money off of it potentially by selling it or by owning the rights to it digitally. And it's just a much more kind of grown up version, in my opinion, of like a video game customizable character, if that makes sense. And they can even go beyond kind of being a digital accessory. I've heard NFTs talked about in the way of, instead of having, and this kind of happens already, but instead of having physical tickets to go to a concert, for example, if you design an NFT for a really popular like Billie Eilish concert or something like that, and your digital ticket also has Billie Eilish on the stay with me here because this might be confusing. On the digital ticket, it might say, or it might have, obviously it has the time and date of the concert, but what it also has is Billie Eilish saying, welcome to the Invesco Fair 2023 concert. I appreciate you for being here. And you can capture that moment on your ticket because it's a digital asset, because your ticket's a digital asset, and then you can save that moment, and then you can potentially own that moment in time when you went to the concert in 2023 in Invesco Field. You know what I mean? So hopefully that makes sense. There's a kind of a limitless possibility when it comes to NFTs and what you can do with them potentially, especially when it comes to events. And for this sake, we're going to be talking about how they relate to fashion and art. I want to ask you, would you ever buy a digital asset or an NFT, whether it be in a video game form or whether it be actual an NFT that's art or anything that's digital that you can't access physically? Would you ever buy an NFT like that? There are NFTs where you can buy both the physical and the digital, but would you ever solely buy something that's only digital, that you can only access in a digital way? That's an NFT. That's a tough question. I think personally, I would say I have before, especially in the context of video games, but it's hard for a lot of us to fathom owning something only digitally, especially if we don't get some kind of value from it other than like in art. You just look at art or you display art. So what kind of value could you have in just looking at your screen, owning a digital asset? And in fashion, we wear clothes. So it might come off as something that's like, how am I going to enjoy the clothing that I buy or enjoy, digital clothing? Well, let's talk about it. I think the psychology behind NFTs is quite interesting. And I think for a lot of the reasons why people buy into art and fashion, the same reasons apply for why people buy NFTs. A lot of people, I'm not saying I do this or I'm not saying you do this, but I know a lot of people who buy clothing in particular, especially expensive clothing is what we're kind of talking about. We're not talking about functional clothing. We're talking about, recognizable branded items. People buy a lot of that stuff because they want to have that one, they want to showcase their personality, right? And they want to just showcase that they have the ability to maybe afford something. They want to showcase the fact that they're a part of a particular subculture in fashion that wears these certain items. And And I think that this level of individuality that people attempt to showcase when they're buying clothing or when they're buying art to display or art for themselves is the same kind of individuality that people want to capture when buying NFTs. So it's not kind of beside myself to think that, the person who buys an NFT is some kind of crazy person, because I think that there's value to buying an NFT. Just like there's value to buying, branded clothing or a certain art piece from a particular artist. There's a correlation between the two, I see. And I think living in 2021, we recognize that we're in an incredibly digitized era. The era has never been more digital than it's ever been before, right? And because because we're all so digitally immersed, I can totally see a world where, the digital assets that are important to us are the things that are just as important as the physical assets, because we want to showcase ourselves in that digital space. And we'll kind of talk about that in a second. So recently I worked with GOAT. And if you don't know what GOAT is, they're a sneaker reselling and clothing reselling site. And what GOAT does is, they provide a service for people who want to buy clothing and sneakers secondhand. And a lot of times what happens in the sneaker industry, if you don't know, is, clothing, sneakers, etc. gets resold, gets bought up, and then it gets resold for 5x or 10x the original price of that good. Now, what Go did this Black Friday, and a lot of other kind of apps and retailers and resale brands did, is that they kind of dipped their toe into digital spaces. So for GOAT, they actually created a Black Friday game called Blackout, where you create this digital space, and in this digital space, you can potentially win real life items if you put digital items within your digital space. Hopefully this is all making sense, right? And so this is kind of where I get into the first thing that I think NFTs and what value NFTs will bring is with this kind of digital space, creating digital mood boards. And I think a lot of people have a desire to do that. I don't think there are any brands or apps that are doing it at a high level, but I think that this example of like creating digital spaces and filling them with digital items is kind of fashion's first entry into this world where we're talking about the importance of digital assets and NFTs. It seems like the future of consumer-based industries is leaning much more towards the digital world. Recently, Nike has filed several patents for NFTs and for digital assets. And I think that there's a couple possibilities when it comes to the world of NFTs and fashion and art. I see a world where potentially where you buy a physical good, whether it be a sneaker or item of clothing, and with that physical good, it comes with a NFT digitized barcode that allows you to not only own that physical item, but also own the item in a digital space, right? Now, in the future, whatever this platform that holds these digital spaces or digital avatars or whatever it might look like, these places will also allow for someone who doesn't necessarily or can't afford the physical item to also purchase the digital item for a fraction of the price, because that digital item only exists in that virtual space. And I know for a lot of people, that's going to be like a really weird concept. They're going to ask, why would I ever buy something that I can only, showcase for in a digital or in a social media context? And I think a lot of people don't understand that people do that all the time right now. People buy clothing, specifically to post on Instagram, to showcase to, their friends or family, to test out items, and to just get a feel for, what it's like owning something. And then maybe they'll return it or sell it or, do whatever they do with it. Now, with the digital asset, the thing is it'll probably be in your digital closet for forever. And something like that is you can't really resell it, and you have a harder time. You just can't resell it. This goes the same for art. This is already happening with, NFTs and the art world. A lot of artists strictly sell NFTs of, digital art. And a lot of artists sell NFTs of not only digital versions of their art, but also physical versions so that the consumer can have both. And I know a lot of people, when we think of, or some of people, when they think about NFTs, they think about like a pixelated cat or something like that. But the deeper you dive into that world, the more you kind of see how much art is being created and how much art is being digitized and being, transitioned over for a digital format. And I see the same kind of things happening for fashion. The companies have not yet figured out how to truly monetize that in the most lucrative way. But in the example of video games, you can already, for example, in video games like NBA 2K, you can already buy, the Jordan 1 for your NBA 2K character. In games like Fortnite, you can already buy the Balenciaga shirt or Balenciaga hat for your character. So it's not something that is like under the radar anymore, in my opinion. I think that NFTs and fashion and art are starting to bubble up, and time will tell kind of what the future holds for this type of industry and these types of products. One last thing that I'll add, just kind of my opinion, my 2 cents. I'm not necessarily sure how or what app or website will house these digital avatars or this social media experience. I'm not sure if it would be Instagram. Obviously, Facebook and Meta and the metaverse have said a lot about what they want to do and what their plans are for the future. It's tough to tell. For a long time, I thought that the biggest social media companies were gonna be the biggest social media companies, whether they be Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Snapchat. And now, in a short matter of time, TikTok has really burst onto the scene. So you never know what's gonna happen in the future and what apps will come up, what brands and what companies will come to the forefront and build something that will truly change the way we interact with each other. And I think that's what the potential of NFTs can do. They can change the way we interact with each other, less so in a kind of real life way, unfortunately. I know some people will consider that to be unfortunate, but more so in a digitized and a virtual way. Now, what are your thoughts on something like this? I'm very, very curious to hear about it. If you're watching on YouTube up until this point, leave a comment down in the comment section. If you have thoughts about this and you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you can comment on our latest Instagram post or send me a DM or just tweet at me, and that would be a lot of fun. I'm curious to know, have you ever purchased an NFT? Or have you ever sold an NFT? That would be something I'm really curious to hear about. Leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts like I mentioned earlier on in the podcast. And as always, I'm spreading peace, love, and positivity in 2021. So that means I'm spreading peace, love, and positivity to you. Wherever you are in the world, have a wonderful rest of your day. We'll see you guys next time. Abianto.